We haven't scrapped it entirely, but maybe we have. So find out one moment here. How many people are willing to consider an expansion, how many people are willing to consider an expansion on the side involving this glass addition? Be brave. Okay, thank you very much. How many people would consider an expansion at the side of the building, not involving a glass cube, but involving a building? You know, this is just, you know, we're not taking names or anything. All right, is how many people are willing to consider, do you see my choice of words? Are willing to consider an expansion at the back that's 3 stories tall and that would necessarily demolish the sunroom? If you're willing to consider that, could you raise your hand? Now, I think you can look around and you see you have a... Do you get to vote too? All right, you can see that we almost don't have to go any further, but we will. But there's a lot of support for the consideration. Not to say we're going to do it, but to consider it. All right, just Chief Librarian Cooper, let me just, so that we're sure that all of the points have been represented here. After hearing what you've heard, how many people, out of consideration for library services elsewhere in Ward 1, and with that information in mind, how many people here would be willing to consider, again, the same language as I've used before, the notion of just maintaining an expansion within the 4 walls and freeing up dollars for use elsewhere in the ward? If you would raise your hand. You see it, so you have a show of support for that as well. I think there's just one second first. I think so. We've demonstrated in this totally unscientific, undecision-making question. That's not a word, I know. But that there's a lot of, and you know, this speaks to the heart of this neighborhood. I want you to know I've represented my 11th year, and Mount Pleasant is an extraordinary place. There are very few neighborhoods in this city which would even think 1 minute about sending monies away from the immediate neighborhood, but this neighborhood is willing to consider this, obviously. So I think we come out of this, you'll all reach your own conclusions. I would say that there's interest, there's a willingness to consider the rear expansion, and there's the notion of there being no expansion within the 4 walls of the building is still a very lively option for a lot of people here. That's what I would say. Am I right? Do you disagree with that? Do you agree with that? Well, go ahead.
That's close. There's always been some amount of expansion on the back as a 1-level expansion. So that's all.
A little, but not.
That's what I'm saying. So I didn't want to be.
How big is your expansion in the back in this current concept?
This is 3 levels. Okay,
So
and the other one would be 1 level.
It would come up to here. This is 3rd level.
It would be this entire thing.